The Lifestylist, episode 109, featuring
Sah D'Simone.
I'm Luke Storey, a former celebrity fashion stylist and founder of School of Style. For the past 20 years, I've been relentlessly dedicated to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of health and spirituality. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Today's show is brought to you by Organifi. Now, you guys know I always talk about their green superfood powder. I take that literally every single morning, sometimes during the day. It's out of control, good, super powerful. However, I just got a hold of their new product called Organifi Gold, which is sort of like a golden latte. It's got turmeric, ginger, reishi mushroom, lemon balm, turkey tail mushroom, all these rad superfoods and herbs. It's, of course, totally organic. And what's dope about this particular product is you can make a hot elixir with a healthy fat, like a coconut oil, grass-fed butter, or ghee, or you can make a cold smoothie with some kind of nut milk or something. So here's my routine. I do the Organifi green powder in the morning or maybe midday if I need a little boost. Then at night when I want to chill out, I do the golden latte using the Organifi Gold. It's a really good warm elixir. It really chills you out and it's gently detoxifying. So that's my favorite new thing. If you want to check it out and all of their products, I highly recommend them. Of course, you can go to Organifi.com with an I, and if you use the code Lifestylist, you will save 20% on your order, which is a really fat discount. I'm pretty into these guys. I think that's very cool that they offer such a substantial discount. So go to Organifi.com, use the code Lifestylist and save 20%. And make sure you check out the new Organifi Gold. It is amazing. Today's show is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. Now, you guys know I'm always talking about their medicinal mushroom elixirs because I take them all the time. I'm super addicted to them. But now they've got a couple other products that I'm really into. They've got a decaf coffee for when I don't feel like freaking out on caffeine. And then they have a regular coffee, but not just coffee. Both of them are infused with medicinal mushrooms. So it's a mushroom coffee. They're fantastic. They've also got some matcha drinks like the matcha with lion's mane. And the thing that's cool about the Four Sigmatic drinks is they're totally organic. They're super powerful. Herbs and superfoods and mushrooms, but they're really easy to use. That's the issue I've had, like trying to be healthy and making myself some cool drinks, is that it's kind of a pain in the ass and I have to open up all these different containers and it's a big project. Their products come in these little packets. You just pop them open. They're very portable. I take them on the plane. I take them on trips. I keep them in my bag, in my car. I kind of have them all over the house, and I can just use them whenever I want. So Four Sigmatic, one of my favorite companies. If you want to check them out, I highly recommend that you do. To do that, you go to foursigmatic.com, and like all of my sponsors, they offer a sweet discount to the listeners. If you use the code Luke Storey, you will save 15% off your order, which is a pretty good deal. So go to foursigmatic.com, enter the code Luke Storey, and save 15%. Check it out. Good morning, afternoon, evening, Earthlings. It's Luke Storey bringing you another episode of the Lifestylist Podcast. Check it out. I've got some good news for you. First bit of good news is that this month, for the month of December, I'm doing not one, but 2 episodes per week. Yep, what? And this Friday will be number 110 featuring Arnie Grinstead, where we talk about the magical healing powers of lasers. It's some pretty crazy stuff. Okay, next thing I want to let you know is that I am so close to hitting my first 1 million download marker. My goal was to do that by New Year's Eve. As of this moment, right now, I'm up to, I think it was 900,067, something like that. I'm real close. So what you can do to help me achieve that goal is very simple. All you have to do is A, subscribe to the podcast so you get every episode downloaded to your device or computer. And more than anything, share it with a friend. Now it's really cool. You know, the iTunes podcast app has kind of had some upgrades, and now you can actually scroll down and click on share and text it or email it to a friend. Super easy. So share this episode with a friend if you would be so kind. Next announcement is that I just did something super cool. I started a Facebook group for you listeners. So now I'm building a community where you can come join me and the rest of the listeners of the show. I'm going to be posting, Q&A videos. I'm going to do live videos where I, post behind the scenes recordings of the podcast, answer questions. You guys can post stuff that you find on there. So I'm really excited about that. All you have to do is go on Facebook and search Lifestylist Podcast, and you will find the group. It's open to the public. Just join, and we will hang out there. I wanted to have one central hub where all of us could kind of chill, because on social media and through emails and websites, it gets a little fragmented. Okay, so that's the announcement for this week. On to the show. This is not one you want to miss, y'all. This is featuring Sah D'Simone. I recorded this in New York City. Sah is just a beautiful human being. I love this dude. We did an event together out there. He was one of the moderators of a panel that I did at this event called Whitma Live, which was awesome. And I was just vibing with this dude. We had so much in common because he started out in the fashion industry, which you'll hear, and then just made this huge pivot and became a meditation teacher, spiritual teacher, transformational coach, and is just this super high vibe, really fun, rad guy. So he's been featured on Mind, Body, Green, Well and Good. He's worked with the UN, Lululemon, American Express, Bloomingdale's, Saks Fifth Avenue, and tons of other influential brands. He's doing just really fantastic stuff. So we're going to find out, like me, how he made that transition out of the fashion industry. He founded a magazine called Bullet that I actually used to shoot for when I was a stylist, which is really weird. And then he got out of that, went and traveled through India and Nepal, and has done just all this crazy spiritual seeking, and came back and was like, ta-da, I'm a new guy, and is helping tons of people and just really making an amazing contribution to the world. So I'm really happy to share this conversation with you. So some of the things we cover are as follows: how childhood trauma plays out in dysfunctional adult patterns, his experience with the Kabbalah Center and how that helped shape his teaching, what it's like to chill with the Dalai Lama, facing fear, guilt, and shame on meditation retreats, and the risks involved in taking spiritual trips to Nepal, India, and other third world countries because your microbiome can freak out on you and you can get really sick. The power of breath work, how to use the third eye as a point of focus in meditation and why that matters. The gathering of meditative energy to sharpen the mind. How he learned to back up the woo-woo of spirituality with science. How his chronic pain went away once he started to serve others based on the fact that when you wish someone well, you boost your own happy neurochemicals. The struggle of the hierarchy of skin color growing up in Brazil. The importance of self-acceptance and acceptance of one's own sexual preference and how he learned how to do that. How he survived being picked on as a kid. How a lack of self-worth can manifest in overachieving and how to fix that. Sah shares his excitement regarding the acceptance of mental health issues becoming less shameful. And finally, exactly how he made this massive transition from being a fashion professional to a full-time spiritual teacher, and what it looks like from a business and financial perspective. So as you can see, this is a very meaningful episode, and it gives me great pleasure to present to you Sah D'Simone. Sah D'Simone, welcome to the Lifestylist Podcast.
Thank you.
So we've been hanging out a little bit today. I'm like, God, how are we going to only record for an hour? I can tell we have a lot of synergy. We have a lot in common. And thank you for having me at the Whitma Live event the other night. Your panel was wonderful. I could tell you were a very high vibe person. And you seem to be very plugged into New York City and the consciousness scene here. So I want to talk to you today about your own journey and what you're up to in enlightening the world, living in an insane place like we are.
Oof.
So here we go. It's a tall order, my friend. So,
yes.
Okay, so the first thing that I realized about you, which I didn't know just from seeing you online and interacting with you through email and stuff like that, is that you're from Brazil, which is like my favorite place on the freaking planet. So what was up? Where are you from in Brazil? How'd you end up moving here?
Okay. Born and raised in Brazil. My parents moved to Florida when we were 16. There was a big business change that they did. Not to go into many details, but
why was it drug dealing?
No. It would have been better.
They were working with some people in Colombia, see? And no, okay.
No, my dad actually worked for the Secret Service looking out for these guys.
Wow.
Looking out for the drug dealers.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things in that way, too, that happened.
So was he responsible for when like the coke scene dried up in the mid-'80s? Because that pissed me off.
It's so funny. My dad never really talked about himself doing anything.
Right.
Which is,
So you moved to Florida, and then how'd you end up moving to New York City?
So lived in Florida, and that was where a lot of the trauma that's been cooked into me really blossomed. It was living in Florida, in Tampa, actually.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Not the most high energy place in the country.
No, it was.
No offense to anyone living there.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really traumatizing place to be in, especially coming. Like I had gone to American schools my whole life, but never fully spoke English very clearly. So being a brown kid with a unibrow, wearing a Nike tracksuit, because that for Brazil was cool. But when you come into America, where all these 16-year-olds are driving an Escalade and everyone's white and beautiful, and they live in it's just everything was different for me personally, personal life, and then whatever was experienced out in the world. So the moment that I could, I left, and I left for LA. And when I moved to LA, I had a pink mohawk, and it was just really starting to express myself creatively, and then lived in LA for 2 years, and then I was researching the misshapes, that party movement that was happening here in New York, in downtown, in Soho, at the basement of Dunhill. And I was like, I want to be part of that. And I also want to know, want to be part of that movement of the Andy Warhol movement, and work for Interview Magazine, and go to FIT and do all those things. So it was literally in LA, and there was 4 of us living in a studio apartment. One of them was a drug dealer, actually, and the other 3 of us, we were actually helping his business, with whatever
as
we
customers.
No, customer
support team, customer service,
exactly.
Sales and acquisitions,
yes,
R&D,
yes, all of the things, and it was just really fun because we were experiencing all these like homes and fabulous people and all the glitz and the glam of that world.
Yeah. Which lasts for about a month.
Exactly. And then it's like, oh, yeah. And then he got caught, and I got in a huge fight with my best friend, 2 of them. And then one of them went back to Switzerland, and the other one stayed in LA. And that's when I was like, I need to get the fuck out of here. This is way too crazy. I had become hooked into cocaine and alcohol. I was like literally living that life 7 nights out of the week. That was what I did. And I was 19 too, 19, 20. And then I just had a moment that I was like, I'm just going to sit down and email these people. So I emailed Interview Magazine, and I got an internship there. Interviewed for FIT, also got in there. And arriving in New York was all of a sudden the Dunhill, the misshapes was all happening, and being part of that movement with that, it was just, I've never seen anything like that, where there was all walks of life, people from all different backgrounds coming together to dance the night away. So that's how I ended up moving to New York when I was almost 22.
And then we share a background which I wasn't fully aware of. I mean, it rung a bell that Anna had told me about your history in the New York magazine scene and stuff like that. But you had founded a freaking magazine called Bullet. And then, which is the weirdest thing is that I did a few styling jobs back in the day for Bullet too. I was like, you were probably one of the people that I was emailing like, hey, I'd like to do a bigger story. And like, cause I was always trying to pitch myself to like New York magazines. Cause in LA, you only got to shoot celebrities, and that's not very respected in the fashion industry. Yeah. I mean, less so back in the day. I mean, I'm going back quite a few years. Now it's changed a little bit. So that's interesting. So then at 22, you move here, and by 23, you started your own magazine.
It was the day that Alexander McQueen died, actually. I remember very clearly. I was on a cab on the way to Bryant Park to the tents, and I get a call from my friend saying, hey, come meet Aaron and Nick. they want to talk to you about this media project that they want to do. And I was like, okay, cool. At that point, I had been styling. I had only, been working with different bands and New York-centric people. No one that was like in the media eye at that point. And then one thing led to another. Next thing you know, 23, there was me, Aaron, Nick, and James. Andrew was also part of it, but the main core group was us when we and then Bullet was born, Bullet magazine, and then fast forward. Almost 4 years, 12 countries, 50,000 issues, spending $250,000 every season. It was just like one thing after another. And I was really lucky to have worked with all the people that we wanted to, because we had such strong financial support. And we have Vuitton and Chanel as advertisers in perpetuity since the first issue. So that gave us like credibility and support. And we didn't have to work how a lot of other magazines did per se. We weren't so driven by advertising because we had all this investment to create. So that gave us access to work with a lot of people in a really creative way, which was essentially what we always wanted. It was really meant to be like, do you remember The Face, the British magazine?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it was like The Face, ID, and Days. We wanted to have that combination in New York, which it wasn't really the downtown, uptown mix coming together. It was very much like you either wear a full Prada look or you wear a full vintage look. That crisscrossing, that merger of uptown, downtown. It wasn't really a lot happening in that scene. And talking about it now, it feels like it was so long ago. Oh my God, because it was like November 22nd, 2012, when I asked to leave. Because that's when I sort of had this burnout.
Well, okay. So that's good. We're doing great here. So that's good background. Now, the purpose of this conversation is to really dive into the consciousness and the transformational work that you do and your spiritual journey. And I like to know where people come from, sort of, I guess you could call it their origin story. And I do find the correlation or the similarities between our paths, drugs, kind of having fun when you're young, gets a little dark, then get into fashion, have some success there, find that unfulfilling for whatever reason, and then start to pursue, what I think appears to be your true passion. So now you're breathwork teacher, meditation teacher, mindfulness, you're into like all this really heavy, beautiful spiritual stuff, and you're really kind of a thought leader in this field in New York now. I know that it's tough to think of yourself as that, but from the outside looking in, like you're very like connected in that scene and have traveled all over the world and studied with, Deepak Chopra and the Dalai Lama and all of these fantastic people. What was the dark night of the soul for you, or a few of them? I've had, 280 of them, but what were a couple, or not necessarily like an event, but motivating factors for you that led you into a life now where you're 100% devoted to your spiritual path and to helping to heal others on the path as well? Like most people don't just do that because everything's going well, is what I'm getting at,
of course not. I realized that there was a lot of betrayal, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt and fear that had been cooked into me. I didn't really know where that was. I thought that I had built all that within myself in this life. And it was when I left the magazine, and all my friends that I had hired to work at the magazine didn't really connect. I mean, it's a much longer story to not get into too many details about that. But it was, I realized that I was a leader in my own little magazine world that was inspiring people with fear, not with love. And I realized the weight that was having on me, continuing to abuse with drugs and alcohol and random sex and all these things that were really, it was a cycle. And I had no idea how to get out of it. So when I left New York, I got rid of everything and I went to Florida. I got this little house on the beach in Madeira Beach. And that's when I started to have a little bit of space to see what kind of life I had been living and what kind of imprints I'd been creating on people and on myself. But the real heavy weight, the real awareness of all the shit that had been cooked into me, that baggage that I'd been carrying for a while, it was when I did my first 10-day silent retreat in the Himalayas up north in India. And then I stumbled upon a talk from His Holiness Dalai Lama and then followed him around. And then there was during a 30-day silent retreat that's when everything shifted. It all changed. When I saw how the belief in our thought patterns to be the construct of our reality was the furthest away from the truth that it could ever be. To the point that I believed that my whole family had died. And I was like crying hysterically. And I paid a monk at the retreat to let me use the phone. And my mom answered, she's like, we're good. We're so excited that you're doing this. Keep going. And
so your family's been supportive of your mission?
Yes.
Yeah, they understand?
They do. And there were several times that I hit that rock bottom. But one of them was during this silent retreat that I saw so much of how I had been living life and how really everything that I had been doing wasn't really my own. You know, I had been living out these prejudices that had been cooked in through my mom's chemistry and my dad's, and all their traumas had been instilled in me, and I was just living that out. So finally I had this space, and that was when I decided to come back to America to really regroup in a comfortable space. And that's when I reached this existential paralysis where I was like, none of it makes sense. I don't know what to do. None of it can get me out.
Were you expecting when you went to India that you'd come back and just kind of jump back into the fashion industry and just keep doing what you're doing in a more awake way? Or had you already went like, you know what, I'm done. I'm moving to Florida.
Yeah.
Fucking out.
That was done. I just had no idea what I was going to do, you know, but I knew that I was never going to go back into fashion.
Right.
You know, once you visit India and once you study, once you get close to these people, there's seeds that get planted, right? Into our subconscious mind, into our mind stream. That
the Shakti, man.
Yeah, just something from, you know, what I've understood. We remember our inherent nature of compassion and service and kindness and forgiveness and creativity. And when we are just constantly putting out and hoping for feedback in that way with the fashion, it was so image driven. I never really saw myself coming back to that space. I mean, to go back to this, I remember studying Kabbalah, and I can't even tell if I was going to Kabbalah when I was still going to fashion. I was still working in fashion. If it was because Madonna would be there every Tuesday, it was because I really wanted to like explore myself, you know?
Well, that's one of the goals I have with this podcast, actually, is to record celebrities that are into health and wellness and consciousness and stuff, because it has such a big impact. So, you know, maybe someone does go to Kabbalah because they might run into Madonna and they're like starstruck or a star effer on a spiritual path. But still, like you said, it gets in. Like, you have to have a pretty hard shell to be around a potent message like Kabbalah or like the Dalai Lama or Deepak or Pema Chodron, any of these really profoundly spiritual people. It's hard to be around that and not get positively infected, you know? And I want to go back to the silent retreat, because this is something I was talking to Diego about, Diego Perez, who's going to be on the show. And he's really into the Vipassana tradition, silent retreats. And they're 10 days, I believe, right? He's like, have you ever done one? I go, no. But once I did a silent retreat in India for 21 days. And I think when you think about going to do a meditation retreat, 30 days is like astonishing. But I think most people think of that like, oh, cool, you go meditate and you're all happy and you just live in bliss and compassion. I'm like, what happened for me when I did the silent retreat? Dude, the deepest, darkest hatred and animosity came up in my mind. I'd be standing in the food line, and it was especially toward women. Mine was, which was stuff I had to work through apparently. And I'd just be looking at like these older women in their spiritual like orange robes and shit. And I'd be sitting there I don't want to say it on the show, but just my mind would start producing these hateful thoughts and self-talking about the people there. But luckily, I had the wherewithal to witness the thoughts at that point, because I'd already been meditating for 10 years and stuff. So I was just like, oh my God. And I felt so guilty because these shadows were just like popping up nonstop. And it was sort of, I guess they were being cleansed, or I was being made aware that there was more work to do. And perhaps I had spiritually bypassed some stuff and tried to be like Mr. Meditation Bliss guy before I had really exercised those very dark demons. Did you find when you did the 30 days that you were like, oh my God, like I'm an evil motherfucker?
That was really why.
Okay.
That was literally why.
So it wasn't just like unicorns and rainbows?
Depression.
Okay.
That was through that. It was
That's
really
so great.
That at that point that I was like, holy fuck, I'm an asshole.
Totally.
I've been such a fucking cunt to everyone.
Were you surprised that you were? I mean, were you going there with the expectation that you were going to find peace and feel really
Look,
good?
here's the thing. The first week and a half, I was like, this is so funny you're bringing this up. Thank you for this, by the way. It's great self-reflection. For the first 2 weeks, we're like, okay, so meditate on the people that you've caused pain and meditate on the people. Tonglen, right? The practice of breathing in their suffering and relieving them of their suffering through the mind's eye, and how that changed the neural pathways too. I mean, there's science that backs all of that.
And this is a Buddhist practice.
Exactly.
Okay.
I studied with the Mahayana tradition, and I really started to see that all that stuff, I have been such a fucking cunt my whole life. And
I think you're the first person that's used that word on my show.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to get hate mail from feminists
sorry.
now. No. Hey, you said it, not me. Ladies,
no.
if you're pissed at him, you email him, not me.
No, I don't mean, I
said that the other day joking around, and a couple women overheard me. Literally 3 women. It was in a group setting, and 3 women afterward came up and just went crazy on me. They were so triggered by that.
What does that word even mean, though? For me, it just means someone that's like,
I mean, the English
bitchy.
have no problem with it.
Yeah.
In America, it has a certain connotation that's very triggering for certain people. Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be
mean to
sorry.
offend anybody.
I think it's hilarious. I'm not fucking offended by anything. I think people need to stop being so sensitive and get over it.
So I enter into this
but-
loop. I enter into this loop of guilt, shame, fear, and that's when I started to acquire these tools, this vocabulary, because I was carrying around all this shame and this guilt and this fear with me after they had waken up. Oh, so to go back to the story. So 2 weeks in, we're doing all this meditation, purification, and I had this rare opportunity to talk to one of the masters there on the day of my birthday. And I say rare because all these people who've been doing this work for so much longer wrote this letter, and I wrote that letter like, yo, I'm curious, like, what's up? Let's meet, you know, kind of like that New York thing.
And people that have been there in the ashram for 20 years never get to talk to them.
Exactly. And all of a sudden, my name's
jealous?
on the board, and everything, the relationship with so many people changed.
Yeah.
Because people are like, anyways, there's not to go into too many details about this, but it's very interesting that
I can already tell
up.
Next time I'm here, we're going to have to do a part 2 because we haven't even gotten into your current life and we're already 30 minutes in.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this. Thank you for bringing this up. So 2 weeks into the retreat, I was like, oh no, I'm sorry guys, but I'm going to go hike Everest Base Camp after this, and then I'm going to go to Bali, and I'm going to go do this and that. You guys all have been so shit in your life. You've caused too much suffering to people. You really have work to do. And everyone's crying and all these things are happening. Said and done, honey. Literally. That same evening, we did the Vajra Safa purification practice, which is an hour of chanting these hymns. They're, cultivate our inherent qualities, and all to use our vocabulary, all the shadow, my vocabulary, all the suffering comes up. And that's when I really was like, my vision actually was peripheral vision, situational awareness, all of it. I lost connection to all of it, and I went into my room, lay down, and my body turned into this fever mode because it was the shock of mental inflammation, lingered into physical inflammation so quickly that I had never experienced something like that. So for the next 2 weeks, I was having this hovering of these clouds of shame, guilt, fear for so long. So left there, didn't go on my hike, flew straight to Bodh Gaya to sit on the tree where Buddha set to become enlightened, to meet my sister, and continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper.
Your sister Moon?
Moon.
Who's going to be on my show in a couple weeks.
Yes,
cool.
She's, this is great because she's high vision.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I just put it together because the last name is not common. I said, and they're both in the same circle, but different cities, got to be related.
Yeah. So I came in to see her, and then the cloud was still there, but then the cloud really became my life after I decided to come back to America. Because I felt like the discomfort that sometimes you put in the austerity of living in ashrams and monasteries wasn't allowing my body, because I get sick very often when I'm in India, in Nepal, in any Asian countries. Just the microbiome of my gut doesn't seem to connect with that. Although I know that my heart is Indian and Eastern. But anyways, when I came back here, I was immersed in that cloud. I was living with that cloud, and that's when I started to talk about it. And that was when Instagram started to be a platform for me to deepen my practice. And it was at the very moment that I chose to not go into Western medical approach to really dive into the practice and chant and pray and meditate and do the breath work and eat clean and exercise and stop watching Game of Thrones and stop doing all the things that I had been doing up until that point, and watching porn and doing all the things that was normal to me, that I was still my spiritual path, but I wasn't in it completely, So it was at that point that I was like, okay, I'm either going to commit suicide in 5 minutes, because I was in the most beautiful home and running and all the beautiful things everywhere and nothing was getting me out of that cloud. The cloud was still right here. And that lens, that cortisol boost that I was getting every morning and every night was lingering on. And you read the research, how it lasts in your body for a whole 24 hours and how that ages. And anyways, that whole thing I was in it for literally almost a year. And then I continued to meditate, do the work even deeper and deeper. And
what style of meditation were you doing and do you do now?
I mean, breath awareness. So shamatha.
Okay.
And that's what I recommend to everybody, is just gathering of the energy, gathering of the thoughts, just having a single point of concentration is just what we need to sharpen the mind, right? And by returning to the object of focus, by resting the attention at the home base, if it is the breath, if it is a mantra, if it is a sound, if it is a point in your third eye, whatever it is for you, it's just the gathering of energy is important to sharpen the mind.
I think of the breath awareness or just present moment awareness, or the meditation I do is mantra-based Vedic meditation. I always describe it to people as like you're almost creating a decoy for the mind, by putting the focus on something else. Like when I'm just almost effortlessly going back to my mantra and meditation, it's almost like throwing a ball for a dog that's trying to like eat your hamburger. It's like the mind will just run off and chase the breath because it gives it something to do. It's sort of like gives it something to chew on in a sense. Is that your experience too, where it allows you to kind of drop down into this transcendent place because you have a point of focus that sort of keeps your mind occupied? Like giving a baby a toy to play with so it doesn't sit there and tug on your pant? Or would you have a different interpretation of how the breath-focused meditation works?
I think it's just, for me, it helps me dissipate the emotional charge of a lot of my thoughts.
Okay.
How my thought patterns are so erratic.
So is that like a physiological sort of thing because you're doing the actual breathing too?
I think it goes hand in hand, right?
Okay, yeah.
Physiologically lower inflammation
right.
and psychologically sharpness.
Because you're also into, I think some of the science, what I've gathered from talking to you is like you like to be able to back up the woo-woo with science, which I think is smart.
Completely how I've been taught.
Okay, because if you try to get someone to buy in that's a little more, analytical, like a linear thinking person, they find a lot of spiritual shit to be fake because it's like, well, what's that going to do?
Yeah,
prove it.
Yeah.
So if you go, well, look at we have this 100 studies on your neurotransmitters and It's
exactly. I mean, that's really how it all started for me.
Right.
It was when I saw His Holiness Dalai Lama. This is the third time in New Delhi at a conference with a group of neuroscientists from Harvard and different schools, and they were going back and forth for 3 days. And I happened to have gone to the conference with Nikki Vreeland. Nikki Vreeland is the grandson of Diana Vreeland.
Oh, no way.
Which is so crazy. That was like this huge fashion powerhouse, the person who changed American Vogue.
Yeah.
Who pretty much changed the face of fashion.
Arguably, like maybe the world's first fashion editor and world's first real stylist before there was such thing as a stylist.
So imagine being with her grandson, who's a high vision monk, sharp, lizard focus, point of awareness, and he is there. And I had met him randomly at the temple in the Himalayas, and then ended up, he's like, oh, come to this thing. And I show up to the thing. There's like, oh, it's only for the students at the university. And I was like, honey, I'm not taking a no for this. And
was that inspiring to you to find someone that was from a prior sort of social scene or a professional world that you respected? Did it validate your path because you're like, oh, someone cool is doing this, I'm on the right path? Or did that have any impact?
What validated the path for me was how good I was feeling.
Oh, okay.
That was really what it was. I mean, yes, it was great to have him as like a powerhouse, but I had chronic pain in my chest. I had chronic pain in my back.
Yeah.
And then you
think
look at
the
all
chest was a broken heart? I mean, just not from a romantic broken heart, but I just mean I always have felt like my childhood like broke me. It like broke my heart. Like I just
completely
inherently have a broken heart.
Yes.
Which is my greatest gift though too.
Exactly. That gives us the tools, the vocabulary to speak from that depth, you know?
And also, would you say a certain level of empathy for other suffering if you've suffered, right?
Yes. I would go a step further and say compassion, altruistic
okay.
compassion, you know? Because that just when things started to change for me, I was like, wow. And then with the Mahayana tradition is very much about dedication of merit, dedication of intention, speech, and action for the benefit of all, and how to really enter into that space of the Bodhisattva vow, you know, I reach enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And taking that vow,
not just for yourself.
No, it's not like I'm not looking for enlightenment for myself. No, it's like how could I reach the state of awareness, of openness, of connection, so I can be of benefit to all beings.
That's funny because I think on a certain level for me, I'm like, I just don't want to hurt anymore. Like I'm like, God, help me find whatever I can do to just feel good. But then of course it does. Once you actually own that and embody that, then it's sort of a natural thing to have the outpouring face the world. But I actually never in the beginning set that intention, you know, from like the Buddhist perspective. I was just like, oh my God, help me, I'll do anything. It was like out of that desperation. So you had this pain in your chest, and then in your back, you were saying, and then that started to become
it went away when it went away when I started to have the discipline practice, when I started to serve. You know, when you look at the research, the behind service and like the helper's high, and it's the same neurochemicals that get boosted when you enter the flow. So when we are blessing somebody or wishing someone well, we're actually boosting these neurochemicals within us. It's just that science and spirituality are in such a beautiful place right now that we actually have the potential to really see things from both lenses. And I mean, for me, it was a big thing to have the ability to see that, like, wow, my suicidal tendencies and this fear and this guilt and the shame that arose was because my grandmother committed suicide and no one ever talked about it. And it was because she had a son who was brown skin. Everyone in my family is lighter skin, but I'm the brown one. How she was the brown one. She had a son who was brown skin too. And then my grandfather told her that she needed to give him away because after they remarried from her first marriage. Damn. So that was a big thing. And
what is up with that in the world?
I know, like, so fucked up.
It's really strange though, because sorry, dude, I interrupt a lot just because this is the way my brain works.
Yes,
listeners
please.
are used to it. You seem like you can roll with the punches, but I've always found this to be strange. Is that like if you say in some Asian cultures, the more pale you are, the more benefit you have socially because it shows everyone that you're not out in the fields picking rice and shit. That you're of the royal class, right? The ruling class. Yeah. But then in Western culture, if you're wealthy, it's good to be really tan, like the George Hamilton sort of tan, because then that shows people you have a lot of leisure time to go fuck around in the Mediterranean or whatever, right?
It's so
but then if you're too dark though, then the elite, like as an African American person that's really dark, like Wesley Snipes, dark, then that's not good to the elite white people that are too unintelligent to understand how lame that is. But it's just a strange cultural phenomenon at all. I've always thought this is weird, even when I was 3 years old or however, when I could first comprehend that some people didn't like other people because of like the wrapping that is around their meat suit. Is just so weird to me. And that different cultures value different shades of skin, but almost universally, the darker you are, the worse it is, the worse you're treated, which is just so fucking weird. And I wonder what the origins, like maybe we're interbred with some alien species and like they were white and they like put in our consciousness that the lighter you are, the better. I don't know. It's weird. But I want to ask, in Brazil, is there that hierarchy of skin tone where like if your family were lighter skinned, did they have an easier time being accepted socially than you being darker? Is there discrimination against black people or darker people?
I think it's everywhere, huh?
It is? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't...
Because in Brazil, dude, one thing I like about it is like there are very dark skinned people there that look like of African origin, but everyone else looks very mixed. Like you can't really tell a Brazilian person.
But I'm from Paraná, which is like the whitest.
Okay.
It's like, it's very
like
light.
Porto Alegre or something? Like, is it down south there where there's more European?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Like, I think it's the second biggest German colony, something like that. It's very, very light skin in that part.
So you experienced discrimination as a kid, even in Brazil?
It wasn't.
Or was it in your mind?
I think there was a lot of self-judgment, but not for the skin color, but for my sexual choices.
Okay.
You know, that's when a lot of trauma started to be cooked in because, you know, in a big project that I'm working on now that we're building with, it's me, a neuroscientist from Columbia University, my friend that works for the United Nations Innovations Department, and we're building this in partnership with Parsons, is to educate parents how to cultivate compassion and creativity. Because research shows that we're all born creative, we're all born open. It's just, you know, we start to have all this societal family prejudice cooked into us, and then we start to lose potential to see ourselves as one, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think for me was a big thing was the fact that my parents didn't have the vocabulary to say, hey, do you like boys? That's okay. Whatever you like, that's okay. We're going to cultivate
Was it like
that.
your grandma's suicide where it's something that they just pretended like wasn't existing, or was it addressed, or?
They pretend it never existed.
Okay,
but
yeah.
then there would be a comment like, oh, where's your girlfriend? Or what is this? And then so I started to date women for that. And it was just very interesting to have that. To have that, you know, and I get a lot of feedback from women.
Were you ever into it?
I was, but not really,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
No, not really. I think it's, no.
What's it like in Brazil? I'm keep going to bring it back to Brazil because it's such a fascinating culture to me. One thing I noticed there, and maybe it's just because I've spent the most time in Rio, and Rio is a beach city, so everyone's like half naked, and there's this sexual tension in the air.
Yes.
One thing I found interesting about Brazilian culture, at least there, and to some degree in Sao Paulo, is that sexuality is very open. And it's not like shamed. Like prostitution in Rio is normal.
Yeah.
Like prostitutes don't like hide in the corner in an alley. They're like on the beach. They'll come up to you like, hey, what's up? Got $50? Let's go. You know? And you're like, dude, aren't the cops going to come? And then there's like a family right next to you and they don't even blink that there's like hookers trolling the beach. And
Yeah.
people like, I'd see like teenagers like making the fuck out in an acai shop or something where even I was like a little uncomfortable. They're like fully getting into it and there's like old people around and you know what I'm saying? It's like
Brazil is like we fuck and then we date.
yeah. It's
Instead
very
of here, it's like you date and then you fuck.
so from at least from a heterosexual standpoint, I was like, wow, everyone's really free here. Do you think there that you found acceptance and that culturally your sexual preference was a bit easier to kind of be open with, or is it the same shit there? Like all the bullies pick on you in school and call
I was
you a
only
fag
Brazil
and,
until I
like,
was
all that.
16, you know.
Okay, well that's enough time to get picked on. I was getting my ass kicked just for having a weird haircut and fucking
I definitely
listening
was
to
getting
Black
picked
Sabbath.
on.
You know,
No, I
like,
was definitely getting picked on, but I was really able to turn that bullying. So I became the bully.
okay.
You know, so I turned that, and I would bring someone else's suffering up. I would bring someone else's, you know, any other thing that I could, you know, pinpoint on someone else. I would bring the focus onto them, so we would laugh at them and not at me. But it would happen when I would like go play tennis and soccer and judo and any of these like very alpha sports that it would require a kind of personality and physical skill that I was just like, this is so stupid. But no, I think it's...
When it comes to sports, dude, I'm very gay because I was fucking, I hated like all things that were like, I mean, I like soccer for 5 minutes, but dude, I could not, and I got picked on a lot too, just because I was skinny and I always had long hair and dressed weird and I sucked at sports or I just wouldn't play and I was very much an outcast. So I think I have a certain compassion for people that are different because I always felt different. I mean, I'm sure other people had it more rough than I did, you know, but I never fit in and was picked on a lot. And I relate to that too because I wasn't like big and strong enough to like go kick people's ass or like beat up the bullies, but I could fuck with their mind.
Oh no, I did.
I had a very, you did? I wasn't like
I was
physically.
very aggressive.
I was
had
physically
rage
wimpy. So
in
you would
me.
kick ass?
Oof. I would gather people to beat other people.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're like
I
the
had
ringleader?
a lot of clearing to do, honey.
I used like psychological warfare. Like I would look for a kid's insecurity, like the bully that wanted to fucking meet me after school and beat me up, and I'd like find the thing they were insecure about, and I would play with their mind. And I was more passive aggressive than overtly aggressive. So anyway,
I'm glad we got over that.
Yeah. Well, you said something earlier that I thought was interesting too, in reference to vocabulary and what I refer to as like my dark side or shadow. You just said that's the suffering part of you, and I really like that. I've never actually heard it framed that way, and that is what it is when any human being is inflicting pain on another. It really is their outwardly express their own pain. I had a teacher once that
own suffering though, because pain is inevitable.
Right, suffering. Yeah.
You know, because pain is something that will happen.
You're goddamn right.
Inevitably, it will happen day in, day out, especially depending on what kind of life or background you have.
Yeah.
But the relationship to the pain is the suffering, right?
Yeah.
So that's the part that we can actually have space.
So I had to
change the vocabulary.
I had a spiritual teacher once that put it like this. He said, Luke, because, I'd get in relationships with people that ended up to be bad people. And he'd say, Luke, hurt people hurt people. It's just the thing that stuck in me. It's like when we're suffering, one of the ways that we alleviate that suffering is by inflicting it on others, at least at a certain level of consciousness.
Yes, definitely.
But the thing that you're saying reminds me of that. One of my favorite sayings is Shakespeare, that there is no good or bad, only thinking makes it so. So
there it is. That's exactly the same thing.
So what you're saying is that we're going to experience physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, but how we frame that is going to measure the degree of suffering which we experience as a result. Is that where you're...
Pema talks about...
Riff on that a bit, because this is the golden key to the universe. Like, this is where freedom lies, is understanding that.
Pema talks about pain lasting on a physiological level for about 90 seconds. Everything that happens after that, it's the story, the narrative that we create. So from the narrative on a psychological level could be one thing. Also, given the chemical imbalances that we have and all of our genetic predispositions that we have, it can linger on through days and nights, sometimes years, and then that could manifest as a anatomical pain, and then you realize that isn't anatomical pain anymore. It's a physiological manifestation, So what I found that through these practices, these ancient, very wise practices, helps us change dissipate the emotional charge that storyline has. It's not that the pain won't happen. It's not that the suffering won't happen. It's just our relationship to pleasure and pain will change. We were able to, it's not that an old memory, a bad memory will change. I mean, although there is scientific research being done about how to erase those parts.
Oh, like reprogramming your subconscious?
Actually on a physiological level,
wow.
Like really going into the hippocampus, like really entering into the air of the brain and then erasing it with laser, for instance. I think a lot of us are going to really get into that later. But
please delete my sexual abuse. You know what I mean?
Exactly, same and same, and so many times. I mean,
or even just getting. When I was a kid, dude, I used to get chased by dogs, and like I still sometimes have that reaction when a dog walks by and barks or something like, ah! like my nervous system just fucking freezes, And
the lack of self-worth that we have in the West, that we are the self-loathing, that we're not worthy of being okay, that we're not worthy of living, loving, and laughing, that we are worthy of pain and suffering, like that being cooked into our overarching theme of how we connect to ourselves in the world. That is, for me, across the board, from working, in some really high vision corporate spaces to just one-on-one clients. We all experience such a disconnect with ourselves, and we believe our thoughts so much, and that emotional charge holds us down. So to just go back into that, I think through these practices, what happens is not that the memories will disappear, is that at once we'll be able to close the book and actually put it on the shelf. And we actually have the space between where we are, your inherent nature, and the bookshelf. So that space dissipates the emotional charge. So therefore, that lens of fear, of shame, and guilt that you've had, a little bit of that veil gets lifted. And then the more we exercise those inherent qualities of compassion, kindness, courage, patience, altruism, we can actually change all of our brain and then rewrite that physiological story. And then you look at the research from Marian Diamond in 1969 in UC Berkeley, and intentional behavior changes. She was pretty much one of the pioneers into the neuroplasticity field. And then you look at Sarah Lazar from Harvard in 2011. about mindfulness.
We're gonna have some good show notes here. So I have not heard of these people. I'm like, okay, cool. We're gonna. This is great.
What
was this? I'm sorry. What was the study about mindfulness? The last one, Sarah
Lazar.
Okay, Sarah Lazar.
So she's one of of course you have Joan Kabat-Zinn, who's done it in a more clinical way, but she's the one that really brought forth, like Washington Post did a big story, and then a lot of those people started to come from and Richie Davidson, everyone knows about him, Matthew Ricard.
I don't know any of these people. I'm getting schooled. This is great.
So Richard...
along these lines, I know Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief.
Yeah, but he's great. He's great.
Is that on a different thing? Okay.
Yeah, because I'm mainly focused on the simple practice of having an object of focus to the breath.
Oh, okay,
and then whenever you notice that you've been caught up in a negative thinking, determining that there's a negative thought, that alone changes the neural pathways. That alone builds a new neural pathway. It's focused on neuroscientists who have a Buddhist background.
Oh, okay. That's the niche you're talking.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
And how do you find these people? Like if you've read books or watched TED Talks or whatever, like if someone other than the ones you've mentioned, if somebody wants to find like the studies and the science, the neuroscience on spirituality and these practices that we're going into, like where do you find this stuff? Does someone share it with you and then you find a teacher of theirs, and does it?
I mean, honestly, if you look at His Holiness Dalai Lama's why he's become a world leader, it's because from the get-go, he's like, bring a group of neuroscientists. Let me show you how these practices really work.
Oh, okay.
And then when you have that, cultural phenomenon happening from a religious standpoint, and then he's sitting with neuroscientists from Harvard, from Stanford, from UC Berkeley, Madison, Wisconsin School, like massive, powerful leading schools coming together to meet this dude. And everything he's saying, there is scientific information behind it. There's no way for you to not. And then for you not to, whoever background you're in, I think Bruce Lipton is an amazing guy. I think some of those topics can be kind of like highbrow. And I think what we do in that niche of Buddhism and mindfulness, we simplify everything. And what I do, I have a Google alert for all these topics. So from neuroscience,
there you go.
health.
I'm like, there has to
all
be
these
something.
teachers,
Yeah.
I have
That's
so
smart.
every Friday I get an average of like 25 to 30 emails. And then you just, the brain works with pattern recognition. So the moment that I see a pattern, recognizing another pattern, there's a dopamine spike there. And then that way I can like already live in that space and things start to integrate. And then at that point, I just start to download all that information. And
that's funny because I only get my dopamine from Instagram.
Oh, come on.
I'm just fucking with you, but I do.
And now for a brief yet crucial announcement. As I mentioned in the intro, I just started a brand new Facebook group for you, the listeners. Yo, I've got a community going over there. I think I launched it yesterday, actually. And if you just go on Facebook and search the Lifestylist Podcast, you will find it. It's an open group. You don't have to get approved. It's not a secret society, Freemason stuff or anything like that. You just get right in by adding yourself. And what will happen is all sorts of magic, okay? You'll be able to interact with other listeners to the show. You will be able to ask questions of them and of myself. I will do my best to answer them. I'm going to be posting Facebook Live videos, just doing Q&As, doing Hangouts with you guys. And also, of course, I'll be doing Facebook Live broadcasts in there of behind the scenes podcast recordings with my guests, which people really like. They get to see the raw dog, real deal of what it's like for me to sit there and interview people. So get over to Facebook, search the Lifestylist Podcast, join the group, and let's make something cool out of it. All right. Thanks so much. And now back to the interview.
How do you tap into the flow?
Well, I do my Vedic meditation. Lately, man, I've always done different breath work that I've just, I learned old school, just hatha yoga, pranayama and stuff like that. But recently more into the more like shamanistic breathing and holotropic breathing, Wim Hof breathing, like more aggressive, hardcore, longer periods of deep breath work. I did that this morning. I spent like 15 minutes just going nuts because I was up really late recording a 3-hour podcast with Matt Maruka, who's sitting here still. He became my adjunct assistant. So anytime that I'm feeling like spaced out and just like overwhelmed and need to get grounded, I do my breath work. I also have this thing that we had you on. The audience can't see it, but it's called the amp coil. And
I do feel a little like...
Dude, I'm telling you, that thing is not, the people watching on Insta and Facebook, this is the coil from the amp coil, and there's this whole amplifier down here. Actually, I could turn it off so it doesn't make noise. But I have a lot of actually like energy devices and healing devices that I use too. You know, I use I have a red laser panel called a Juve that's in my office / kind of biohacking spiritual studio. That releases serotonin, dopamine, increases your testosterone, fuels your mitochondria, which gives you energy to actually have positive thoughts. If you ever notice when you get run down, it's so much easier to have the propensity toward negativity when you're fatigued. So if my mitochondria is like firing on all cylinders, then I like can actually transmute a negative thought into a positive one. I do infrared saunas, read spiritual literature. Anything and everything I can do. I mean, you'd have to interview me for 3 hours to even touch the surface.
I actually am very curious about that. Can we change the script at some point and interview you about it?
Oh, totally. We'll do it at some point. But you know, a lot of the same stuff. But my mind is not oriented to where I'll dive too deep into like the research. I kind of like, I see, like you said, a correlation between a couple different practices, shamanic breathing, which I called something else shortly before, shamanic breath work, and you go, oh, this is with the holotropic breath work, and those guys discovered that because LSD became illegal, and they wanted to find a way, okay, that's connected, so that shit works. They're doing it in Peru on ayahuasca journeys, there's breath work there, you know, so it's like, and then Wim Hof, and you can do that breath work, and then you can sit in ice bath for 20 minutes, no problem. So I see how the different things are connected, but it happens really fast and it's not linear in any way. It's just like this intuitive validation when one thing touches another thing, or like the principle that I described, the Shakespeare quote, there's no such thing as good or bad, only thinking makes it so. So the minute you say something that is the equivalent energetic match to that, I go, oh, that's true. You know, just like when you hear truth. And I sort of just assimilate truths over time, whether they be a physical practice or spiritual or mental, and put it together. But I've never been good at like being able to correlate who said what when and the studies and stuff like that.
I'm not either, though. There's just a there's just a group of people who have really made mindfulness what the buzzword that it is.
Right,
you know,
right.
That you can trace back to who they are.
You know what I find is interesting is that the New York spiritual scene that I'm sort of starting to get in tune with and meeting great people like you. And I interviewed Ellie from Mindful, and I'm interviewing Elena Brower this week, and just tons of fantastic, very high vibe people that live in New York. I'm working on Sharon Salzberg. I've got some big dream. Marianne Williamson is one of my goals, but she moved to New York recently. You could just see her whenever you want in LA, and now we're like, damn, we miss her, you know? But I find out here that a lot of the teachings and a lot of stuff people gravitate toward tends to be kind of in the Buddhist tradition. You know, it's like the East Coasters seem to kind of go in that direction a little bit. And then California, we're all over the place, but there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. But do you find that a lot of the stuff here that really becomes popular is sort of centered in Buddhist tradition?
Yes.
So it's not just my perception of that?
No, I mean, look,
it seems
don't get me
prevalent.
wrong. I think there's that because the Buddhists could also, they simplify, but it's also very intellectual. There's lists for everything. You know, and highly intelligent people love to have lists. And New York is a place where, like, the dumbest person is reading 5 books a year, and the borderline smart is reading 10 books a year, and then someone who's really killing it is reading a book a month. You know, or people like my brother who read a book every week, and there's they're just it's just different. Yeah. And I find it in California, it's a lot easier for you to experience a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and this. And
that's why Kundalini yoga is so big in LA, man. Yeah. You know? I mean, it has grounding kriyas too, but
LA is epic. The fact that we have everyone there relatively much more, less, have so much less suffering than New York, the East Coast of America. But I think the Buddhists, a lot of these teachers live upstate, you know? Yeah. You have one of the most leading voices in the mindfulness movement, Sharon Salzberg, living right here at Union Square. You know what I mean? You have Joe Rizzo and Miles Nied and Robert Thurman and Emily Wolf and the guys from Nalanda University, Nalanda Institute, right here at Tibet House. You know, I study with them every Thursday for 3 hours. Like, it's for some reason they chose to be in the craziest city in the world. This is the reason why I actually relocated back to New York, is to be closer to them.
Wow.
You know, because that was an opportunity to do the same kind of close study of contemplative psychotherapy, where it's the most cohesive group of neuroscientists and Buddhist teachers coming together to do it in San Francisco. So I could live in LA and go out to San Francisco once a month and study with them there. But I was like, why would I not be seeing these people face to face every Thursday for 3 hours if I can, you know?
That's so interesting to me that people that are, you know, on the consciousness path to such a degree of commitment would choose to live in a city that's so much the antithesis of like health in every way. I mean, this is like such an unnatural, if you just look at, we have such a lovely view here today. I wish you guys listening on the podcast could see we just got lucky and have a great view. But it's like everything you see goes against our biology. You know, the EMFs, the cell towers. It's
There's
just
not
like
one natural shape.
Yeah. Everything's like right angles. It's just the whole thing. So it's so interesting. But when you're saying that, how there's like this.
But if you can make it mindful here, you can make it anywhere.
Well, that's what I just had sort of this revelation. It's like, okay, so all these teachers, they could go all live upstate and stay at Omega Institute or some shit or whatever. It's like, but they're living here. It's almost like this is where the calling is. This is where you're needed. And this is where you have the highest concentration of human souls embodied, one of the highest concentrations in the world, in fact. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to make an impact, and your job, especially from the Buddhist perspective, is to alleviate suffering for all living things, including yourself, because we all are one living thing, really, yes. Right? So what better place to be, in a sense, than where your wave, the ripples hit more people?
Exactly.
Rather than, oh, yeah, cool, I'll go live in Sedona. Everyone's already fucking on board there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Everyone's
like,
good. We're all good. Yeah.
You know, it's like everyone is already meditating on the rocks every morning.
Exactly.
You know, here in New York City, like, is almost where you're needed. It's like, it could be a sense like you're a spiritual relief worker or something. Which reminds me, on your site, I saw something interesting. I know we're just about out of time here.
We can go for another extra 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. You're certified in mental health first aid. And
that was a trip.
So what does that involve? I love that term because I feel like I need that a lot. And speaking of the city here, I mean, goddamn, everywhere you look, man, there's a lot of people that are suffering that also need that.
If you look, when I started,
is that a real thing?
It's a real thing.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
wow.
You do it with the New York Health Department.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's something that the New York Health Department has an initiative that they want to have 250,000 people certified in 3 years, which is huge thing that they want people to actually have the vocabulary to look at someone in Akinetosha like, be like, hey, how are you? Are you thinking of committing suicide? Have you thought about it? For you to have that vocabulary, to just be able to tune in to someone and then from that point on, know if you yourself could do the work or if you should be talking to leading someone else. You look at the research of the ACE study. Have you heard of the ACE study? Adversary Child Experiences, and that shows that 7 out of 10 people have experienced trauma, physical, mental, or sexual abuse growing up. So if you're in a room with 10 people, 7 out of those 10 people have experienced trauma. And then you look at the research going even further. 1 out of 5 people in America are experiencing mental health illness. So how the fuck can we all just like sit around and not do the work, you know? So when I started to feel a little bit better, I was like, I need to do something about this. If I got a little bit of space for my suffering, if I was able to walk around that statue of suffering just a little bit and have just a little bit of perspective, and I was able to give suffering, shame, and guilt and fear a little bit of a vocabulary that helped you be able to navigate your own, I was like, we all need to talk about this. And then you look at the World Health Organization, the WHO, and they are the institution that sets the health trends for planet Earth, casual. They say that by 2020, so in 3 years, depression and anxiety will be the number 1 pandemic. So literally across, and then you look at the statistics that we have, and then you look what they are predicting. There's nothing else that really personally for me that matters than to help alleviate suffering and get people to become mental health first aid. And I think a huge part of this work that I always use those vocabularies, these big words of suffering, guilt, shame, fear, is because we're all experiencing it. We just don't have the vocabulary, the openness to say these things to each other. We're always, mental health is such a stigma. This is what my work is, to really break that stigma and really get people to drop in. So there is a training that you can do with the New York Health Department for kids and for adults. It's a 8-hour intensive. It's very traditional. It's very my perspective, it's very prehistorical actually, because you have psychoanalysts and psychiatrists and you name it, the gamut of people who are really serving in the world out there, but they're still eating the foot-long Subway, drinking the soda, smoking the cigarettes, taking the drug, doing all the things, and they're there in this room, and those are the people who are helping alleviate suffering. And then you clearly know that these are all the things that are setting you back, inflaming your body, therefore inflaming your mind. It's the research is out there. We actually know this mind-body connection. It's fucking crazy.
That's funny
to
that
me.
you mentioned that, because sometimes I'll be walking around and I see someone with like a giant, not like a can of Coke, but like the giant, like the huge cup of soda.
The 7-Eleven cup?
Yeah. And I see someone drinking that, and I'm like always like, oh, holy shit, people still do that. Like I remember being a kid and drinking those big Slurpees and shit like that.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been, I don't know how many years since I've had something like that, but I go, oh my God, I feel so bad for them. They don't realize, like, everyone knows it's kind of bad for you, but they don't realize, like, it is really, really, really bad for you. I mean, just drinking one of those one time would like wreck me,
Completely.
I want to cover something just in closing here in our last couple minutes, and it might be something that takes more than a couple minutes, but I'm curious, when you started having this awakening, so you came out of the suffering, all the stuff that we've talked about, you're doing all of this traveling, you're studying the research, you're studying under these masters, and you're just like obviously a very devoted student. At what point did you decide that you wanted to become a teacher and turn this into an actual career? And when you did you have to work through your own self-doubt, shame, feeling cheesy about like becoming like, oh, now I'm like a spiritual person and I'm going to charge money for it and like that? How have you dealt with that transition?
All of the things, honey. Thanks for bringing this up. This is a really good question. So when I came back from one of the times that of me coming back from India, because I would do the 6-month pilgrimage and I would be coming back to America for the other 6 months. And I didn't live in a city for nearly 4.5 years. I started to live back in a city last October. So during one of these trips, I was one of these stays at Omega. Someone said, you have to teach, you have to speak in this way. I think the way what you've experienced personally gives you the potential to speak to people who are experiencing it and who want someone that they can relate to, speak to them in this way. I was like, okay. So I decided to teach one class and 30 people showed up. And then I went away. I went back out to my pilgrimage. And then I was actually did my pilgrimage in India and then went to live in Bali for a couple of months. And I ran into Avalon, who's one of the teachers at the Omega Institute. And she's like, Sah, I've been thinking about you. I think you should actually teach your class as a longer class. So I applied to teach as a longer class. And I thought that it was called the happiness equation, but turns out some guy wrote a book called the happiness equation, right? Which I was unfamiliar of. And it was a 6-week course tying up to the 8-week research of like 8 weeks of these practices. You actually change the plasticity of the brain in 5 main areas. Therefore, making you physiologically compassionate, kind, and all the qualities that we're trying to cultivate every day. That was when things just opened. It was my first teaching. It was at the Omega Institute for the staff. And there was 25 to 35 people that would come every week for 3 hours, every Saturday for 3 hours, and we would just dive in. I literally put in everything I knew, everything I had studied for all those nearly 4 years, from all these teachers, from all these different modalities. I put everything in that I could back up with scientific research. And then when you're not a scientist, you actually can tie in knots in a different way. You can actually connect things there's more flow in it. When you have the PhD, those kind of credentials, you kind of have to stray away from some kind of vocabulary. Because I don't have that, I can speak from personal experience, still using that vocabulary. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Which then gives you the potential to speak to a wider audience. So after the Omega Institute, I had that as like a credibility to come into New York. And then I was teaching at Maha Rose, and then I had some, like Rihanna stylists coming to my thing and then posting about it on the Instagram, and then this person, that person, people from the fashion world who were, because at this point I had already been posting a lot about my suffering, a lot about the tools that I had every day as a potential for awakening, every waking moment for a potential for awakening. So using those vocabularies from how I ate to everything I was posting about it. So at that point, I had a little bit of a base in how I was already framing my vocabulary. And then when I came to New York, one thing led to another. And then there was a big point that I did a talk at Washington Square Park about forgiveness. And there was almost 200 people there. And the senior engineer from Google was there. And then he was like, oh, I want to, help you expand this and then this thing and that thing. And then one thing led to another. I then led a meditation for MediClub, and then from MediClub it was American Express and the MoMA and the United Nations, and then things just happen. And I give everything back to the practice. Once you have that discipline with your daily practice, that you're disciplined to relieving your suffering, that you're disciplined to living every day with spaciousness. Then things just happen, and then you can go from that vocabulary that you manifest your reality, your thoughts create reality. It's all that shit is real,
and along the way, and thank you for that. And along the way, the second part of that was,
did I ever feel cheesy?
Well, did you have like imposter syndrome and those kinds of things that when we're starting something? I mean, I speak from personal experience of just like, wow, I'm gonna just all of a sudden kind of be an expert at. Not all of a sudden, it's something I've been into for a long time, but publicly, I'm gonna say, yeah, okay, I'm a guy that knows some shit now, and I'm gonna train people and have clients and do talks and all this stuff. Was there, or even from the standpoint, not only imposter syndrome and self doubt and all those things, but when it comes to mixing money and charging.
Thank you for all this. This is so great because so many people, new clients that I have that want to do this line of work, they have so much doubt in what they're doing. And I did have a lot of that, so much that at the very beginning that I was teaching, I was only wearing white, and I was really trying to be, very much from this space of purity, but forgetting what it was to be dynamic and flamboyant and funny with, that I really am inherently that person, and utilizing these tools that I have of outside dressing in a way that people can relate to, allure you in to take care of yourself, So that was a big thing. It was, I would feel like an imposter when I would get in a fight with my mom still over the dumbest things, that she said something that triggered me, or I would literally be angry at the person because she didn't put enough foam in my latte in the morning, or I would didn't have the spaciousness to be able to respond instead of react. I still have this reactive. But then the more you do the work, the more you feel grounded in what you're saying, the more you realize that it's a continuous flow, and charging money is a way for you to support yourself. And we need to rewrite that story for everybody that's in the wellness industry. So many people are charging so little money to do such powerful things. So I think I stand strong about saying to people that, and I have new clients that come in that are paying me hourly rate of things that I had in mind in a couple years, which then you're like, okay, fine, and then you get the opportunity to work with such powerful things, and you walk in to teach a 30-minute class, and then you get, it just, the potential is infinite, we're entering into a space where, into an industry that is already becoming a billion-dollar and multi-billion-dollar industry that is very multifaceted. I think the most important thing is to just align yourself with tools and practices that that they work, that you see them working, that they help you respond to life, not react to life, that they help you help others, that they help you feel good. My whole motto is like, how can I feel good today so I can make someone else feel better tomorrow? How can we just fill up our cup today Therefore, we can fill up someone else's cup tomorrow. I know this is very much the base of spirituality, but that's the base of neuroscientific research too. You know, when and I've said this before, and I think I posted something on Instagram earlier today. It's just that simple catching of yourself or judging yourself or others, and you rephrasing that right when it happens. That spaciousness to determine the quality of your thoughts, and then implementing, may I be happy because I don't need to judge myself, or may she be happy because I don't need to judge her dress. At that very moment, you're building new bridges in your brain, and that therefore you're elevating the bioelectricity of your body. And I think you're very much into that. And so many people speak about bioelectricity and vibes and energy and aura from that way. But, you know, we're all tapped into, we're all connected to the same grid, energetic grid. And once our vagus nerve is toned in a certain way, we therefore are operating at an optimum variability rate. So therefore we're permeating people in a non-verbal way. And then you look at psychology research, Western psychology research, 90% of communication is non-verbal. So just by how you're carrying yourself, you're permeating people's lives, you're changing people's lives. So I think I invite all the wellness people to come to New York, because if you're doing the work, you're changing the lives of people without having to say anything, you know, just by being, you're doing the work. So to go back to the imposter syndrome and to go back into charging money, I think you know simply how you make other people feel. If other people feel good around you, if you make other people feel like they're worthy, if you make other people laugh, if you can get someone to love themselves just a little bit more, then you can say fuck it to all those self-doubt and all the self-loathing and anyone else out there that is judging you because now you're a spiritual teacher or now you have answers, you know. But you always remember that we're just reminders for each other, because all these scriptures, all this work that the Buddha did and all these incredible teachers did, they just went inside to find what we already have inherently, you know. All the biggest lineages, like let's talk about Patanjali's The 8 Limbs of Yoga. That was like one of the most comprehensive approaches to the enlightenment. And then the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, looking at these two very comprehensive approaches to enlightenment. And enlightenment is just a state of mind that you're free of suffering, you know. And I think your audience is very aware of that.
That's cool. I've never heard that definition of enlightenment.
Oh, okay, cool.
And here's the thing that is. This ties into the spiritual bypass piece, is that enlightenment is not being free of pain.
No.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's being free of suffering.
Yeah.
So it's like you said
that's
that,
exactly it.
How Pema Chodron said that pain actually only lasts 90 seconds. Is that what you were saying? Yeah. And this is something that I recently kind of tuned into from various teachings again, that I saw this sort of synergy between all these different things, the same thing being said by all these different people that possess this level of wisdom. And it's that sort of my old biker spiritual teacher used to say, you know, he's from Louisiana. He say, Luke, the only way around it is through it. You know, it's just like, that's it, man. It's like to have the fortitude with which to just weather that 90 seconds of feeling those tears come on, or feeling that rage, or feeling, you know, whatever you're feeling. Because
feel the fucking feels.
Dude, I've spent my whole life up until, you know, a few years ago, like literally all of my energy every day was spent running from feelings, even good feelings. And I discovered recently, dude, I have an upper threshold for good feelings, that when I start to feel too good, and I still do this sometimes, I just became aware of it, I'll do something destructive and counterproductive to myself, because I'm actually not used to just feeling happy all the time. So if I get too happy and successful, I'll do something to like stay up too late, or eat some weird food, or, you know, have a relationship.
A whole story about that at some point.
Have a relationship that's less than constructive or whatever, to like make myself not be as happy as I'm starting to be. It's so fucking weird. So I just love everything we've talked about today. I know you got to get going, and I have some stuff I got to dive into here during this lovely week in New York. But man, I just want to say that it's been just so great to be able to get to know you.
Thank you.
We've passed a little bit here and there, but to sit down and spend some quality time and like really dive in is just awesome.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for offering, you know, this sort of New York quasi-Buddhist psychological standpoint. I haven't really approached things on the show from this perspective. So it's really exciting. It's cool. It's like at the end of the day, like all the paths lead to up the same mountain. You know what I mean? But it's really neat. I just never get tired on this show of interviewing people that have their own unique perspective on it, because it just colors it in a different way. And maybe some of those many thousands of people that are going to listen to this will relate to you that maybe didn't relate to the neuroscientist that I had on that was like too heady, or the California woo-woo Kundalini person that was too spacey or whatever, and they're going to they're going to go, Sah, man, that's my man. That's the guy that I could really, dig into. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Tell us before we go, where people can find your work.
My website, www.sahdsimone.com, and my Instagram. Follow the gram. I really am using the Instagram stories to find ways to, educate in a way that's very easy and accessible. So I have that discipline of doing it every day. So check it out.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. And then my last question is, and you are a good Instagram follow too. One thing we didn't get to touch on, but when you follow Sah on Instagram, like, dude, you have the best style. Like, you dress so dope. And I think
Luke was talking.
And I think that's cool that you're into spirituality, and it doesn't mean that, like you said, you have to walk around in white robes, or that you have to denounce self-expression in the form of physicality.
Yeah.
That it can be done from a place other than egomania and trying to wear, designer labels to prove you're better than everyone and all that shit that I'm sure, well, I won't assume, but that I know I have done, and many people in fashion of getting caught up in all that. But you have like a very cool aesthetic, and something I really like about where this is going now is there's a lot of sort of younger, very creative, artistic, talented people that are bringing style and great branding and stuff into the space of health and wellness, which you're very much doing. So follow him on Instagram. And then my final question is, what is it? I ask it every time. Oh, yeah. I mean, you've mentioned tons of them, but who have been 3 profound teachers or teachings in your life that we might go to learn from as well? Could be a philosophy, a book, a film, a person, anything.
Okay. I think the Dhammapada is a big one. It's a Buddhist text, the sutras. It really hones into the Buddhist words, unfiltered by the disciples later. A really powerful book that's really talks a lot about what I've spoken about now. It's called Altruism. It's a big one though. So put it on your audiobook and, go on a long drive if you're in LA, or hop on a walk, listen to while you're in New York. It's by Matthew Ricard, and he's a former molecular biologist, gone Tibetan Buddhist monk. And it's very much about these inherent qualities that we have that Freud said we weren't, but the reality is that we are. Don't let anyone else tell you that you're not good, because we are inherently good. And then a teacher that speaks about suffering in the way that I could just listen to all day is Sharon Salzberg, which I hope you get her on, because she is an incredible, impeccable person. And of course, Pema Chodron, and His Holiness Dalai Lama, but that's it's a little bit harder to get to him. But if Pema, she does talks around, and Sharon is very accessible, especially if you're in New York. She has something going on every week, and she just has a very clear.
Actually, I'm going to see her at Mindful next Thursday night.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
She's a high vision.
Yeah, and she has a podcast too.
She does.
Yeah.
Her podcast,
I
highly
Hour,
recommend.
I think it's called. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks for those recommendations.
Yeah, of
a couple
course.
that I didn't know and one that I did. So awesome. Cool. All right, man. Well, let you go live your life. Thank you for coming.
Thank
and
you.
Really appreciate your time. And I can't wait to do this very soon again.
Thank you very much, Luke. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but my heart's really warm. Is your heart like melted after that great conversation with Sah? Is it pouring out of your chest? What a sweetheart, right? I love sitting down with people that I don't know, really. We had met a couple times, but didn't really know. And we just drop into the zone, right into the vortex, and have a real heart-to-heart conversation. It was amazing. So I'm really stoked to deliver that one to you. And if you're stoked about it, you know what to do. Click the share button on your device, whatever you're listening to this on, and send it to a friend, someone that struggles with mental health issues, with shame, self-doubt, someone that's interested in meditation, spirituality, all of the stuff that we talked about in the show. The best way to heal the world is to share the things that you find that work, and that's what this show is all about. So I appreciate your support. I really, really appreciate you listening. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you to devote your ears to the Lifestylist podcast. If you want some more of this action, as I said earlier, I am dropping 2 episodes a week in the spirit of the holidays. So this Friday, we've got number 110 with Arnie Grinstead, and we talk all about the healing powers of lasers. This is madness, you guys. You're not going to believe the stuff that these things do. You know I'm really into the biohacking tech, so Arnie and I met at the Bulletproof Conference, and we sit down in my living room and just like go full geek mode. But if you're not a sciencey person, don't skip this one, because there's a lot of really good information. And of course, as always, I really try to present it in a way that is relatable and understandable by normal people like me and you. And if you're a super nerd, well, then you're going to dig it too. So that's this Friday. And what else? I think that's it, man. Happy holidays to everyone. I'm really looking forward to this Christmas. I'm just grinding it out right now and getting all these podcasts done. I kind of dug myself into a hole here because I promised to deliver 2 a week. And then now I'm like, wait, this is double the work. What am I doing? I could have stretched these out over the next few months, but whatever. I want to hit 1 million downloads. I want you guys to get as much content as you can before the beginning of the year, because I have some great things in store for you. So thank you once again. And I'll be back in your ears this Friday, and then again next Tuesday, and then next Friday, and on and on and on until the end of the year. And the last show of December will be on Christmas Day, featuring Guru Singh. So dude, you better subscribe. You don't want to miss any of the action. All right, peace out. Laters. Don't forget to let those fingers do the typing to get yourself over to Organifi.com with an I, where you can enter the code Lifestylist and save 20% off on all of their fantastic products, not the least of which being the new Organifi Gold, which is my favorite warm golden latte evening drink. I mix it up with a little butter or ghee, and it is absolutely fantastic. You got to try it out. It's very relaxing, calming, detoxing, superfoods, herbs. It is amazing. Okay, check it out at Organifi.com. Use the code Lifestylist and save 20%.